So thank you all for joining us this evening for our webinar on microplastics in the Great Lakes. Before we get started on that, I just want to give a quick introduction to Plastic-Free MKE for those of you who are new to the coalition. Just some background information. Plastic-Free MKE is a 100% volunteer-supported coalition working to reduce single-use plastics in the Milwaukee area. Our mission is to reduce the harms that unnecessary plastics have on environmental health, public health, and social justice. We will center those most harmed by plastics, build a community around plastics alternatives, advocate for producer and polluter accountability, and use collaborative problem solving to eliminate plastics in the Milwaukee area. We envision a healthier Milwaukee for everyone, free from the harms of unnecessary plastics. If you would like to learn more about Plastic-Free MKE, you can email us, you can visit our website, or you can check out our social media channels on Facebook or Instagram. And this is going to be all of our information on that slide. We're currently looking for some volunteers to help educate the public about the environmental, social, and health impacts of single-use plastics at various local events that we're going to be invited to throughout the summer. So email us or sign up on our website if you're interested. And now I'd like to introduce Art Hirsch, our speaker for the evening. Art is a former environmental consultant with over 30 years of experience. He lives in Boulder, Colorado, and spends his summers in Pentwater, Michigan. He's originally from Michigan, and he received his Bachelor of Science degree from Michigan State University and a Master of Science degree from the University of Colorado. His expertise is in the areas of water quality, stormwater management, sustainability, and environmental impact assessments. He's a former Wisconsin resident and worked for the Pabst Brewing Company. He has been a Climate Reality Project member for 3 years and became a leader in 2021. He's currently working on the Enbridge Line 5 shutdown, GHG reductions associated with transportation and oil and gas operations in Colorado, and microplastic pollution. So thank you, Art, for joining us. I will hand it over to you.
Good. Thank you, Carol. Try to get this. There we go. Good. Well, thank you. Thanks for setting this up and asking me to attend this meeting this evening and allowing me to discuss a very important subject in regards to the environment and public health. That's issues that are facing the Great Lakes. And I want to thank all of you as attendees. I appreciate you being here. There's a lot of things that you could be doing this evening other than sitting here and watching me. So I hope you get out something out of this, and I really appreciate your time. Before I get started, a few things I just want to acknowledge, okay? First of all, I want to acknowledge that we in the Great Lakes occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary land formerly and currently held by numerous indigenous individuals, tribes, communities, and nations who historically were forcibly removed from their homelands. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold ourselves more accountable to the needs of the American Indian and the indigenous people. Next, I want to acknowledge the people of Ukraine, a brave people who are fighting for their lives against an invader with no value of human life. They are fighting for their freedom against an enemy who was not threatening and had no cause for invasion. It's important that we here in the United States do not look the other way from the human atrocities that are occurring in this particular war. So thank you for listening to the acknowledgements. And let's get started. So these are the things I want to be planning on just briefly talking about tonight. It is, what are plastics, microplastics? Many of you know this already, perhaps. The extent, we'll go over the sources of these microplastics in the Great Lakes. What sort of controls and regulations currently exist, and what can we do to try to address this problem in the lake in terms of some sort of control. So I'm hoping that you'll become better aware, concerned, and take this information with you after you're done. And take action, of course. So the Great Lakes is an amazing place. It's a natural wonder, especially in these times of severe drought in the United States. It contains 6 quadrillion gallons of fresh water, which is 90% of the fresh water in the United States and 21% of the fresh water on the planet. It provides drinking water for over 450 million people in the Great Lakes Basin. The basin provides, in the Great Lakes, provides a population with high quality recreation, swimming, sailing, fishing, boating, etc. The overall Great Lakes Basin is comprised of 94,000 square miles and has a unique aquatic and terrestrial ecology with over 2,730 miles of shoreline. Truly an amazing place. So I hope my presentation will sensitize you to the environmental problems facing the Great Lakes that most state, federal agencies, Canada, and even the International Joint Commission has largely ignored. It's amazing that an average American ingests 5 grams of this pollutant, plastic, via water, food, and air. That's the weight of a credit card that goes through us every week for people in the United States. This emerging water quality problem represents an ecological, public health, and economic risk to the Great Lakes region. Microplastic pollution has been known to exist since the 1970s and has negatively impacted beaches, shorelines, and associated ecology of the Great Lakes. This presentation is going to have basically 3 main themes, things I'm going to say over and over again. So please bear with me. Microplastics represent a risk to the Great Lakes. 2, there are a lot of technical gaps that need to be filled in by research and funding. And 3, the issue about plastics and microplastics is really a complex issue, socially, economically, etc. So I'm originally from the state of Michigan. And actually, if you can see my arrow, this is where I'm from. I'm from the southwest part of Lake Michigan here. And where my beach house is right here in the Pentwater area. So we're very lucky to be able to still enjoy the benefits of the Great Lake area. So I'm 69 years old, and I grew up on the shores of Lake Michigan, and I've been very fortunate. But during my 69 years, I've seen a lot of abuse put on Lake Michigan. And this is just a laundry list of horrible things that have happened to Lake Michigan, from raw sewage discharges that were done before the Clean Water Act, freighters blowing out their ballast tanks with oil and indigenous species, polychlorinated biphenyls, zebra mussels, quagga mussels that have basically overtaken the entire biology of Lake Michigan. Then we've got agricultural runoff from nutrients enriching the lake. We have perfluoroalkyl substances, otherwise known as PFAS. Forever chemicals are now not only in the water, but also found in some of the fish in the Great Lakes. And now we've got this new emerging pollutant called microplastics. So when people think about plastics and they think about the aquatic environment, maybe the first thing they think of are the oceans, because they've gotten a lot of press, a lot of visibility with a huge amount of trash that is being thrown into the oceans. A gyre really is a circulation pattern. There's 5 of them on the planet. And essentially they're generated by what they call the Coriolis effect of the Earth. The spinning of the Earth creates these circular motions that has a tendency to accumulate large amounts of trash from Asia, North America, South America, especially for the northern Pacific gyre, which is the largest one. And you just get a sense of how ugly and how huge this is. This is essentially 5 areas of the state of Michigan in terms of size, and it's growing. So this is both the circulation patterns and the depositional patterns of plastic that's happening in the Great Lakes. And then you can kind of see these circular patterns here. Here's Milwaukee. I think we'll write it right over here. Again, you can see there's a circular pattern in this very almost like a closed basin area to some extent of this part of Lake Michigan. You can see the patterns here, not quite so pronounced in Superior. You can see them in Huron, especially in Lake Erie, much smaller, shallower, and then also in Lake Ontario. And so these circulation patterns, what they do is they necessarily don't collect plastic trash, just like the gyres do in the oceans. A lot of that material, instead of being circulated in a clumped area, it's basically distributed along the lake shore. And that's why we're seeing a lot of problems with plastic pollution and microplastic pollution on the shorelines. And this picture over here on the bottom right, just kind of just shows you these depositional places of plastic where the plastic loading occurred. There's high depositional areas of both raw, heavy, big plastic, like a macroplastic and microplastics. And again, you can see there's a lot of depositional area here in the lower part of Lake Michigan, driven by Milwaukee, in these particular areas here. And then you see a lot of plastic deposition here near Detroit, in the Detroit River, Lake Erie. You have a Cleveland influence, and Lake Ontario, which is at the back end of all of this water going through. And also we have the town of Ontario. So it just kind of gives you a sense of the distribution and how it's affected by the circulation patterns of the Great Lakes. So this is plastics is it's a complex issue. I don't know how else to put it. It's in our everyday life, if we like it or not. And all plastics are not bad. And so there are some that are associated with the medical profession, going into the hospital areas, or even the construction of automobiles, creating a very lightweight sort of automobile, which helps in fuel economy, less greenhouse gases emissions, etc. But there's also a lot of waste, a lot of abuse of plastic material, such as what they call single-use plastics that you see in the grocery stores here. You see it in bottles that many people drink their water from. Even the vegetables that people eat, it's covered with plastic. So it's a very complex issue, and it's integrated very much in our quality of life. And it's going to be eventually affecting our quality of life. This is just a laundry list of the plastics. There's a whole bunch more of these, but these are kind of the more common ones. On the name is on the left, and then the application is on the right. So I hope you can kind of get a chance to be able to read that. The ones in the yellow are mostly the predominant ones that are found as plastics and microplastics that are discharged into the Great Lakes. So we have high density, low density polyethylene that many of us unfortunately use, milk jugs, shampoo bottles, food wraps, etc. Polyester with ropes, fibers, PET, which is water bottles, fibers, and food containers, and polypropylene and polystyrene. So this kind of gives you the laundry list of some of the, quote, bad actors, if you will, in regards to the plastics and their accumulation in the Great Lakes. Okay. So this graph here, I think I can almost talk about the whole presentation on this one graph, but simply put, you look at this trend line. This is a total amount of waste in million metric tons on the planet, a cumulative amount that has been for plastic materials. And what's happening is that you can see this huge curve, and it's almost exponential in a way of looking at it. It's huge, and it's increasing by a factor of 3 by 2030. So in other words, the amount of plastic that's being manufactured now is going to increase 2 to 3 times that factor by 2030. It's going to be a huge amount of plastic that's going to enter the environment. That's one of the things. And the second thing is that plastic manufacturing is really energy intensive. And so it's equivalent to in the future here, there's going to be 42 new plastic plants worldwide. And that's equal to about 27 coal-fired power plants. So it's an amazing amount of energy that's being used. So anyway, this gives you a fact. The issue is that things are not going to get better, and recycling is not going to be the issue of getting us out of this really steep curve. Another issue about plastics is the additives. And there are certain types of chemicals called endocrine disruptors. And maybe, I'm sure many of you have heard of these. It really affects our ability to reproduce. It affects the development of unborn children and really creates a fertility problem with humans and other types of animals. These are just a laundry list of some of the chemicals: BPA, phthalates, alkyl phenols. All these nasty types of chemicals are basically introduced inside the plastic for various types of purposes, for color, for strength, for flexibility, and also for durability. So, but these are basically known endocrine disruptors. And so one of the things I'll note here at the very bottom is that the fertility rates in the United States has dropped 30% over the past 35 years. So I guess it kind of begs the question, is our exposure to plastic at such a high rate really the cause of this lack of fertility that we're seeing in the population? Let's get into some of the loading. Here is the loading of the Great Lakes of plastics, and it's an amazing amount. 22 million pounds of plastic goes into the Great Lakes per year, where Lake Michigan is #1, followed by Lake Erie, Ontario, Huron, and at the bottom is Lake Superior. So remember, I was mentioning a lot of that material that's thrown out onto the lake basically ends up at the shoreline. Well, 80% of it is plastic. It's an amazing amount. So we all kind of have a feel what microplastics are as we've walked on the beach, and we've got, we've seen these types of plastics before. And so, but there's a formal terminology that I was going to run by you here. They're less than 5 millimeters in size, which is 3/16 of an inch. So that's the term microplastic. There's 2 types of microplastics. One is called primary, and the other one is secondary. Now, the primary ones are basically manufactured at that specific size. In other words, less than 5 millimeters for a specific industrial purpose. They're like what they call microbeads, and it's used for industry to clean out boilers, to clean out rust, paint, etc., using these really fine microbeads. Back in the day, they were used for cosmetics and were in toothpaste. There's materials called nurdles, which I'll be talking about in more detail. Again, manufactured specifically below that 5 millimeter mark. So those are the primary ones. But the secondary ones are kind of what we kind of have a feel for it by looking at this picture and the things that we've seen on our beaches. It's really basically, it's degraded pieces of large plastic. That's the secondary piece that's less than 5 millimeters. These large pieces of plastic get broken down because of the UV light, wave erosion, wind erosion, abrasion, and they keep getting put into smaller and smaller and smaller sizes, micro sizes. Also, microfibers also come from synthetic clothes that are bigger and get down to smaller and smaller and smaller. I'll be talking a lot about synthetic microfibers in a minute. And then there's nanofibers, and these are basically, you can't see them. They are very, very small, and they're very susceptible of getting into fish tissue at a very deep level and causing a toxic problem. So there's 5 basic types of plastics, microplastics. The fragments that we just seen before, we see on the beach. There's pellets, and those are called, a lot of them are called nurdles, that are kind of a precursor to plastic jet mold injection. There's film, microplastics. They come off of bags like potato chip bags. People leave them out on the beach, they get beat up, and then they end up being in the water. We have foam from styrofoam. We all kind of have a feel for what styrofoam is. And then we have the fibers, microfibers. So each one of these types of fragments have their own peculiar surface area. They have their specific own density, and they have their own unique shape. All those things, especially the shape, really has an effect on some of the toxicity that is being experienced by the biota. So this is samples that were collected in the Great Lakes. There's 21 samples on the Great Lakes on the left side, and there were some tributary samples, 107 samples that were collected. This was back in, I think it was about 3 years ago. And this was data collected by the USGS, actually out of the Milwaukee office, if I'm not mistaken. Looking at the tributaries, these basically are samples collected from the tributaries, streams, lakes, et cetera, going into the Great Lakes, where the dominant type of microplastic are microfibers, okay? And so it's somewhere around 72%. It's really high. And I think I was really surprised at that. So then you go over to the left side, more of the open water type sampling that was done, like the middle of the lakes, that sort of thing, where it's calm, relatively calm. You don't have that turbulence of the tributaries, where you can see fragments are basically the dominant type of microplastic, followed by pellets, films, and foams. So again, it kind of gives you a sense of kind of the distribution of where these microplastics reside in the Great Lakes. This is just a snapshot of some of the data of what it looks like in terms of the overall abundance of microplastics. This was data that was collected back in 2014. It'll just give you a sense of where most of the microplastics are located. Where we have, where we have Lake Huron as being the lowest, followed by Lake Michigan at about 17,000 particles per kilometer squared. And then we go into Lake Superior, which is 30,000, which is higher than Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. And then we go down into the Lake Erie area, and then we get a whole bunch of very high concentrations of particles in Lake Ontario. And again, that flow regime through the Great Lakes basically keeps going down this way, then it goes through the Detroit River, Lake Erie, and then starts accumulating more and more microplastics as it hits Lake Ontario. But one of the interesting things about this is I talked to Dr. Mason, who collected this data. I said, how come Lake Superior is so high? There's no industries around here. They said it's because it's such a huge lake, that it's because it's from aerial deposition of plastic is really the main source of the plastic. And it takes so long for the water to drain out of Lake Superior that the particles just reside there. It takes 200 years for the water to completely flush through Lake Superior because it's such a huge, huge body of water. So anyway, This gives you a sense of kind of that aerial deposition and distribution of microplastics in the Great Lakes. So where does this come from? And I'm going to talk just several numerous sources here that I'm just going to be quickly going over. Wastewater treatment plants. That makes sense. It comes from homes, their sanitary sewer systems, and also many places have their stormwater put in to their sanitary sewer, which basically goes into here to be treated and discharged out into the Great Lakes. Then we have those industrial discharges that I talked about, you know, cleaning boilers, etc. That basically is more of a primary sort of microplastic. This was probably the wake-up call. Usually most of the people who I give presentations to are just amazed that this is a major, major source of microplastics are actually the clothes that we wear, the synthetic clothes, microfibers. And you can just see just from one clothes load, 700,000 fibers is basically the average. And this really bummed me out because I have a lot of synthetic clothes because I ski, I hike, I cross-country ski, etc. And most of my clothes are synthetic. And so I was really bummed out. So I'm going to have to start looking at more of the natural fibers, such as wool or cotton. And next time I start renewing my wardrobe. Even the detergents that we use have those micro beads in them. Look at the size of number, how many micro beads per milliliter. It's an enormous amount. So your Alls, your Marvin Hammers, your whisks, all this stuff has microbeads and microplastics. And not to be outdone, there's also the clothes dryers, almost on scale of the washing machines in terms of the amount of microfibers that come off of the actual drying machines. It's not going to get any better for the synthetic clothes. It's still a high demand sort of product, as you can see from the curve here, the polyester, where mostly cotton and wool have been pretty stable in terms of its production over the past several years, but you still see that huge increase in polyester product production. Sources such as beach litter, rubber that comes off of the tires ultimately end up in the water through the sewer systems during stormwater events, or actually the material become airborne coming off of tires. We've all seen this, trash material that accumulate in stormwater gutters, ultimately going into the tributaries. And there's agriculture. And this is really one of the bigger data gaps that I've noticed. Most of the work is being done in Great Britain on agriculture, but a lot of the discharges come from stormwater events that are not contained and ultimately erode the stream bank areas, carry a lot of material, plastic material, into the tributaries and ultimately into the Great Lakes. So one of the first items, huge items, again, more research needs to be done, is how much microplastics are in these, what we call biosolids. Now, for those of you who don't know what biosolids are, it's material that's collected from wastewater treatment plant facilities. It's dried, it's transported over to agricultural fields for two things: fertilizers, and soil augmentation because of the organic matter. The thing is, these things are loaded with microplastics. And once the water hits this material, like stormwater events happen, it'll run off, go into a ditch, and ultimately into a stream, and ultimately into the Great Lakes. This is a big problem that really has not really been well quantified. Agriculture, many times farms use specialized types of plastic mulch for certain types of crops like strawberries and chilies, those sort of things. That plastic material is used up and basically not needed landfilled, or it's just left, or even that some of the agricultural people will burn it. that material. Even fertilizers and seeds are encapsulated with plastic. Landfills is another source where you've got landfills. And what's comprised of landfills is a lot of stuff that comes from residential waste from our homes. Also biosolids. Not all the biosolids that are generated go on agricultural fields. And so the wastewater treatment plants basically find a landfill that will ultimately take it. And then again, stormwater brings a lot of water down through these biosolids and ultimately ends up in the groundwater or ends up in ponds or basically runs off into surface waters. This is an amazing statistic. I had to look at this data several times. This is just from aerial deposition. And this is work that was done by Utah State University in conjunction with the USGS. 1,000 tons of microplastics per year settle in approximately 100 million acres. This is a work that was done in the western part of the United States, looking at the national parks and wilderness areas, and really looking at deposition of microplastics. And the bottom right is just kind of a snapshot of some of the aerial deposition plastic that was being quantified by this. So a lot of this work was done at, I think this is Rocky Mountain National Park. But anyway, a lot of the national parks out west are accumulating large quantities of microplastics. There's an industrial discharge related to microplastics. And this is what I was telling you about with these noodles. These are basically precursors to plastic. They're manufactured by fossil fuel companies, petrochemicals. They're transported to plastic manufacturers. And then they're melted and used in the ejection of plastic materials. This stuff gets loose and spilled quite readily and ends up in Lake Michigan a lot. This was one of the things that I found on my beach in Pentwater is I didn't know what it was. And so I had to start doing some research because I had a huge amount of nurdles on my beach and I had no idea what they were. And then when I found out, then I became more and more interested in this whole microplastic topic of water pollution. So I'm not going to go through this slide in any detail. I'm going to start talking about ecological impacts. And what I'm just trying to show with this graph is all the interconnections of just being able to identify ecological impacts to an organism and all the connections and relationships that have to be quantified and studied to really understand almost like a dose response sort of relationship of what happens when organisms come encounter with microplastics. Again, this is a complex process. So I'm not going to do justice to this. There's a lot more environmental impacts than I can put on this slide. A lot of it has not even been quantified as of yet. Again, more research needs to be done on these human and ecological impacts that I'm going to be talking about. I already mentioned the 5 grams of plastic per person per week through food, water, and air. Microplastics have now jumped the placenta and now going into developing infants. And it's actually found in the meconium of infants. One of the things that, and this was just data that came out from Denmark. I just read it last week. And they found out that the concentrations of microplastics is higher in children, babies, than it is in adults. And I just found that amazing and frightening. And what they're postulating in this particular paper was that babies are fed primarily through plastic bottles. And they're thinking that microplastic material is getting into the babies, again, through that plastic construction of the bottles. Microplastics are now found in the blood. So that means it's mobile. That means it can go anywhere and reside in whatever organ it sees fit to lodge into. It's found now into the deeper parts of the lung. Again, these are just relatively new findings that are happening with microplastics. And there's a lot of damage that's being found, that damaging of cells by microplastics from laboratory tests. So that's kind of the snapshot of the human perspective. Ecologically, the plastics, the microplastics, they have a tendency to absorb toxic materials and heavy metals that could absorb onto the surface and be ingested by various types of organisms. This shot right here, this is plankton. And this, what's glowing here are plastic materials that the plankton has absorbed, which then plankton is the base of the food chain in the Great Lakes, even in the oceans. So this is a real big problem. Plastic is mistaken by food for fish, and it leads to starvation. And it really can cause a lot of food chain accumulation of plastics up to us, to the humans area. So these are areas of concern. These are the nurdles that was mistaken by food by a fish. Okay, there are controls. So here's things we can do and things that happen going on right now in terms of trying to get some sort of a handle. But some people think, well, we can just clean it up. If it's spilled, we'll just clean it up out of the environment. And it's impossible. It's impossible to clean this up. It's so small. And there's not enough energy to be able to take this water and filter it. It just isn't going to happen. You have to stop it. You have to stop it from ever getting into the aquatic system to begin with. It's called source control. There are things that can be done agriculturally, industrial-wise, it can be done to kind of control these microplastics. Better stormwater management, stop littering, stop smoking on the beaches. We can improve our wastewater treatment plants, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about that here in the next couple of slides. But the thing is just to stop the use of single-use plastics. That would go a long way towards really solving a lot of this microplastic problem. Let's talk about a little bit about upstream controls, and this is mostly related to microfibers. There's two things that can happen. One is it's a substitution. In other words, just changing out, getting away from synthetic materials, going to the more of the natural fibers, the biodegradable type fibers, or the non-shedding type fibers. The next one is usually buying a washing machine that already has a filter unit inside the unit itself. That's called a Grundig integrated filter system. And you get pretty good removal of microplastics, 90% removal, followed by what they call a guppy friend, which is another mechanism to use for microfibers, and then a Coroballs. And you can see over here, here's another unit here, a filtration unit called Planet Care here. So again, filtration systems can be effective. And wastewater treatment plants, wastewater treatment systems are very effective in terms of removing microplastics. Again, that's why the biosolids have so much plastic in them. So they get 90% plus removal of microplastics, which sound really good. But the problem is that the remaining 10% being discharged, the flows are generally in the millions of gallons per day. So there's still a lot of plastic that is being discharged. Real quickly, in terms of regulations, of all people, Governor Schwarzenegger was the first governor to sign a microplastics bill to try to control the nurdles that are being spilled into the ocean and also into various stream systems in California. So it's the only state that to date that has done anything in regards to nurdles and plastics. Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois has introduced a bill, Senate Bill 1507, called the Plastic-Free Waters Act. Again, really pointed mostly towards nurdle accumulation on the shorelines and trying to control them. And I'm just going to mention this one. It's called the Break Free from Plastics Pollution Act. And this addresses all types of plastics, microplastics, recycling, manufacturing of plastics. This is a huge bill that was developed by Representatives Lowenthal, Clark, and Senator Murphy. Senate Bill 1263 in California. This is the first of its kind of actually developing a statewide microplastic strategy. And this is by it's no surprise the state of California developed this, and it has this is probably the top thing that I've seen thus far at a high level of starting to address microplastics in a state perspective. So real quickly, what can we do? These are big picture recommendations. Researchers at a university level need to start talking to political leaders so they understand what the problems are in the Great Lakes. Invest in money and solutions. Solution-based research needs to be done. Promote local knowledge and awareness. Again, expand those human and ecological risk assessments and really understanding how much risk are we having by drinking and eating, drinking water and eating fish from the Great Lakes. And trying to reduce the amount of plastics going into the lake. So what can we do at our level? First of all, vote for environmental candidates that, and one of the things that we can do is you can support future legislation that hopefully will be coming. Avoid single-use plastics, use reusable shopping bags, modify your personal decisions about what you buy, either clothes, the type of material that you buy, or even the food that you buy. Do you really need it wrapped in plastic? Look at microfibers. It's very possible that something hopefully will happen in the Great Lakes, where eventually a lot of people will be required to have microfibers. This is what I'm hoping. Use micro-free plastic detergents, promote outreach, teach your kids about microplastics. And one of the big things is recognize the fact that we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. Finally, if you want to join a campaign to start addressing this issue, feel free to contact me. My contact information is at this end of the slide right here with a Dr. Seuss quote that I'm sure that you've seen before, perhaps even read to your children. So again, please contact me if you want to get involved with saving the lakes in regards to microplastics. So with that, I'll be glad to address any sort of questions, comments, thoughts that you may have. And thank you for listening.
Yeah, there were a couple comments that were added in the chat. Someone asked if Milorganite, it was Terry Wiggins, asked if Milorganite has been tested for plastics and beads. I looked on their website and it looks like they are tested for at least 20 different pollutants every day, but it looks like most of those are going to be heavy metals and other micropollutants, but it doesn't look like it's microplastics. So maybe that's something we should. Right.
Yeah, the Milorganite's more of an inorganic as opposed to an organic synthetic. Mm-hmm. But the Milorganite does carry heavy metals on it, and there could be an interaction with the microplastics and being able to carry those heavy metals into the water column.
And Lisa Conley, I believe she was talking about things that we could do would be bottle bill, reverse state ban on community banning plastic bags, such as in Wisconsin, we have a preemptive ban on plastic bans. Yeah,
music to my ears. We've been lucky in Colorado. We've been able to ban single-use bags. It takes into account, kicks in actually in 2 years, getting rid of styrofoam and single-use bags. So that's been so if Colorado can do it, other states definitely can do it, sure. But the theme here is that recycling is important. I'm not trying to discount that. However, it doesn't solve the problem. Only 9% of people recycle. And so when you see these Pepsi and Coca-Cola commercials saying, all we just need to do is recycle, and it can solve all the problems with the plastic, it's not true. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I completely agree with that. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Timothy, do you have any questions? Hi, I was going to pick on you.
Are there any, related to plastics and containers? Have there been any advances in lighter weight glass that's alternatives to plastic, or alternatives to plastic that are containers? That, I mean, I know there's a lot of different kinds of, but I'm wondering if there's anybody who's doing any research or if there's becoming advances in.
Yeah, and it's, and I don't know. I haven't seen anything in the literature about doing research on glass. I wouldn't be surprised if some glass companies are doing something about it. Remember back in the day where we used to get a Coke and it used to be in a glass bottle and we used to bring it in for 10 cents. Why can't we go back to something like that? And something with glass, it's recyclable. It's much more recyclable. Takes less energy to recycle than anything related to plastic materials. Is that going to answer your question, Tim?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some research on that.
Let me
and
know.
as far as water systems and are there countries that are doing advanced work on eliminating plastics through their water systems?
No, I'm not seeing a lot of it. I mean, if there is a place, it probably would be in Great Britain. I think they're kind of ahead of most everybody. Even in Denmark is getting involved with this. Mostly what would have to happen is it's almost like sand filtration. You would need something like a fine filter to be able to remove those fine plastic materials out of solution. And only a type of sand filtration or other type of filter unit would do that. The trouble is it's expensive. Even in wastewater treatment plants, they call it tertiary treatment, which is basically filtering, extremely, extremely expensive. So that's part of the problem. Hi, Barbara.
Yeah, I have a question. While I think it's fantastic that you've shared this presentation with this group, I'm wondering if you're getting the opportunity to offer this to, there's so many Great Lakes consortiums. Are you getting the chance to take this presentation to those kinds of collaborative groups that can really, that are focused on the Great Lakes security and safety and well-being?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the answer is yes, I'm trying. I'm a one-man operation so far, with this outreach and education. I have reached out a lot to various types of chapters, such as with Nicole's chapter, with Waterkeeper, Climate Reality. I've given presentations to about eight organizations. Then I've started looking at watershed organizations, primarily in the state of Michigan, and trying to set up various types of presentations. What I would love to do is to try to get a hold of the senators, Senator Durbin, Senator Johnson, which is a long shot, but the other senators like Peters and Stabenow, and really be able to sit down and give them this presentation and really hopefully get some real traction and make a difference. So Barbara, I'm trying.
Why don't you try Senator Baldwin? Wouldn't she be more apt to?
I tried. I tried twice, and I tried her aide. I got a hold of her environmental staff member,
Mhm.
and nothing. I haven't gotten any return phone calls or emails or anything like that. So I know senators are busy, but their staff should be able to make time
Sure.
to have a conversation. So I'm trying.
Thank you. Could you also put up
Thank
that
you.
slide on what we can do that I need to see that again. Could you put that slide up so we can all?
Well, I can't do that. I don't know if I can do that.
Oh,
But
all right. Well, we're
no,
going to get it later.
Yeah, I'll send it to
yes,
everybody in
I'm
the follow-up email.
now you're going to be testing my technology. But by all means, the copies of the slides will be available to you whenever you want to. Just call them, get a hold of Nicole.
Yeah,
Right,
and
Nicole?
there's another question in the chat from Doreen. She's asked if there are any filters that you can easily attach to the washer drain into a laundry tub. The photos look like they were more permanent devices. And also thanks for the
Yeah, there
presentation.
are. Those two that I showed, I can't remember the brand names right now. What I did is I went on Google and I did some research on them from various types of authors. And then I went to Google and found that, yeah, you can buy them through Amazon if you want to do business with them or directly through them. And they aren't that expensive. I think they were running about $130 if I'm not mistaken. It's something that you can easily retrofit your washing machine in to have those types of filters. But the challenge is to remember to change the filter out, and what to do with that material and that sort of thing. So, but there's things that you can do right now to start addressing the microfibers that are going into the wastewater treatment plants or to the lake. Yeah, good question. Anything else?
One of the things we can do is get involved with Plastic-Free Milwaukee.
Exactly. Exactly.
This is Candace. I have a question. I didn't ask it correctly, but are there things that are in the works that require the producers of plastics to be fined or to change their practices, or things that could attack it somewhat at that end?
Candace, that's a great question because the answer is yes. It's called extended product responsibility. And luckily here in Colorado, there's a bill pending right now of having manufacturers of plastics being responsible for the management and recycling of plastics. For what's happening for years and years and years is that the plastic manufacturing has put the burden on people, the consumer, to take care of their trash, their plastic material. And so finally, I think one of the first ones was Oregon. And I think the one to follow soon after that was Maine, and actually starting to pass this Extended Product Responsibility Act, where the manufacturers are financially responsible for the recycling and management of the material. And that's a big thing, because if it starts taking money out of their bottom line, then maybe they're going to stop producing so much plastic. And if they'll might be able to make it in a better way, and not necessarily force a lot of plastic down people's throats in regards to dealing with the problem. Does that answer the question?
Yes, Wisconsin is not likely to be on that list in the next 10 years, but with redistricting. So, supporting other efforts but still movements start in certain places with certain bills. So one should always value whatever steps go forward in any area, because many things have started. I mean, look at all the people who do carry. Many restaurants now, have either paper straws or no straws. And that's not where we live. It's not by legislation. It's because pressure from consumers asking that question. And so there's still value with that, knowing that that's out there, and also thinking about, continuous steps that we can take even with our local businesses, I guess you could say.
Yeah, Candace, one of the things is that, you think that it's not going to happen in Wisconsin. Well, it won't be happening maybe probably at a state level in maybe our lifetime. I understand that. But a federal law, that one slide that I showed, the break free from plastics by Representative Lowenthal and Senator Murphy, see, something like that would basically, which has that extended product responsibility component in that law. So it would take more of a federal law for it to really be able to become mainstream in Wisconsin, Michigan, and many other states. So did people,
Go ahead.
I have a question. Did people learn something today? I mean, was it kind of did the lights turn on a little bit at all?
I did. There were things that I learned. I think Terry had a question really quick, but I'll let
Sure.
you go first.
Yeah, this is Bruce Wiggins. I just wanted to comment that Sierra clubs all across the region have, I think, local programs and staffs, and Sierra clubs would be a good place to contact for doing presentations like this. Our club actually has nominations due tomorrow for next year, so I'm going to nominate you. That's why I was asking for your contact information. But those would be good places for you to contact, I think. And
yeah.
So just contacting you through your email would be the way to go to start this process.
Yeah, you can contact me. I think also have my email and also have my phone number. So either way, that's convenient for you would be great. And I appreciate you passing on my name. I've tried the Sierra Club a little bit in the Lansing, Ann Arbor area, but I just haven't been able to break through, so to speak. I did. I take that back. I did give a presentation to the Sierra Club, and it was Detroit. It was the Detroit region that actually I gave the presentation to. So
yeah, well, there's multiple.
Those are good comments.
Yeah, those are multiple chapters, and each one has its own programming capability and so on. So it may be complicated, but just like somebody said, the way to get people on board is to get constituents or people from that area who are members of the organization to nominate you and say this is an important topic and so on. So
thank you.
Contacting Tammy Baldwin, you need Wisconsin people to contact her, and in the local Sierra clubs, you need to get local people again, but keep at it. You're doing great work. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Barbara, I think I saw something on the chat about money. I think I saw something about that, and that's really kind of you. But I'm a volunteer, and so I'm a one-man show. So what I need is people who want to get involved and and help me get the word out and ultimately get something going where we can get the conversation going, where we can actually start making some sort of regulations and laws that ultimately will help. And it's important. I don't want to downplay a single person's responsibility for managing plastics on their own, because it's really important, and it's a cumulative effect. But the biggest bang for the buck is really starting to make laws where everyone has to follow. And that's where the time efficiency comes in from my point of view. If you can actually make a law either at a federal level or a state level, where it's actually going to make some difference. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Well, I think we all need to think about how we can help you get some connections to legislators. It seems to me what you're talking about is getting at a policy level, not just giving talks. I mean, there's infinite numbers of chapters. There's only one of you. You know, we've got to help you be efficient in what you can do. So you've given us a lot to think about.
Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So that really is important. Again, I want to remind people about the Plastics-Free Milwaukee movement, which is on the ground here in Wisconsin.
Mhm. Yeah, doing everything we can to reduce plastics in Milwaukee, and we'd love to be like a blueprint for other cities too. So hopefully, you know, people learn about our movement and make a plastic-free whichever city they're in, and we can just keep growing from there. Yeah, thank you so much.
I saw the chat about the credit card. Got a lot of. I gave a presentation 2 days ago to high schoolers. I think there were about 20 people in a science class, and I knew the teacher, and she was pretty jazzed about the topic. And so when I told them about a credit card, and what I did, I pulled it out of my wallet, and I had them visually look at it and see it. And I mean, their eyes are like really big, and so it caught their attention just as it caught yours.
Yeah, I was unaware of how many microbeads were in laundry detergent, and I learn about plastic every day. So that one
You see,
caught me
back in 2015, the Obama administration got them taken out of cosmetics,
Mhm.
the microbeads. So toothpaste, you know, various types of cosmetic material, of, you know, things that people use for whatever purposes for cosmetics. And so I thought that, oh, that was a done deal, you know. And then I turn around and find it's actually used in detergent.
Yeah, that's
You
what
can-
I thought too.
And you can buy clothes detergent, laundry detergent that doesn't have the microbeads. So that type of product is available out there. It's out there.
Are there any
Anything
other-
else?
All right. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It's been great. We all here have learned a lot.
Great.
Yeah.
You've been a lovely audience. Thank you very much for the questions and the attention. And by all means, if you want to get involved or you want to contact me with any contacts or